Welcome to the Wooper Club League Season 15, Week 4 Power Rankings. We've hit the halfway point. I think nature is starting to heal a little bit. We'll take a look at the standings in a little bit and see if that is true. I'm your host, IllLogic, coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant. I am not joined by my usual co-host, Steve of the Watery Bouffalant. Instead, we've got another familiar voice from the channel. It's Michael, coach of the Route 1 Birbs, joining me for Power Rankings as well. Michael, thank you for coming on in relatively short notice and helping me dissect the Power Rankings and season thus far.
Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Taco, coach of the Waterdeep Burbs, here doing the power rankings thing.
And you usually know him from the Match of the Week, which we do, of course, try and advertise on here. We don't cover every match because Michael does an excellent job diving into a lot of those matches. Even if he likes to feature my losses, that's okay. Michael will still let you on the show because we get to do some amazing things like break down all the wonderful trades that have been going on, which we get to start off with the one and only trade this week. And yep, it's the Chi-Yus trading Terra Captains, one tier 0 grass type for another Gloom into Cottony. Hey, do not be threatening that Gloom. That thing is a bit of a tank. Wonder what he's cooking with the Cottony, though. You got to face him this week. Did this cross your mind at all?
Honestly, no, I completely forgot that this trade got made.
Excellent. And that's about all that we have for that one. And that means that I get to go into a review of this week. Let's get into it and take a look at what happened this week. Good news for Steve, even though he isn't here with us, rip Steve, we can still go over his victory in his memory. The Wobbuffets taking the 6-0 over the Miltanks. Turn 1, Zorua swaps into close combat, perfect Willow and knockoff into Lapras's cute, followed up by Pain Split and U-turn, showing off the full set, ending in Necrozma, getting up rocks. Ooh, Sui and Arcanine in Sunny Day. Flare Blitz into Petrant does well over half. Geez, swapping to Victory Bell, who only does a third to Petrant, though. Arcanine in after parting shot, but Berserker with the big KO on entry. Zorua back in on Gyarados, gets off a Willow and barely survives the follow-up. Drillpeck, Petrant in, Ditto to copy, and that's some anti-Ditto technology. Substitute, and now no Ghost move being run. That's pretty easy. Malignant Chain hits Victory Bell low, then two more take down the Gyarados, who just can't break the sub. Garchomp takes one easily, gets Toxic Poison, breaks the sub, but hey, sub up again. A couple more times to run it low. Rest Garchomp, very cool. And an immediate poison on Wake Up, of course. Parting shot out, and Garchomp hits itself in confusion twice. Oh man, Terra Fairy, Necrozma forcing it out. Ditto tanks a hit, Berserker into tank that, then U-turn to KO the Chomp. Look at the team's health. Ice Spinner for Victory Bell, Lapras down to rocks, then playing with those food, eventually KOing the opposing Ditto with ease. Another great game from Steve. Next up, don't look now. Cavalry Corviknights are on a bit of a roll, taking yet another match to move up to 3-1. This one against the Close Combat Club. Turn 1, Torn Tail wins as it gets Toxic. A great second Toxic. This one into Annihilate. CC goes off into Volcanion, but Annihilate getting low. Annihilate in, and Volcanion immunes the flip turn from Alomomola and gets the burn, but Wish goes off into Torn to at least knock off those boots. Volcanion down to half as Orthworm is in, gets up rocks, but Hoopa clicking buttons brought low, but Shadow Ball does get the KO, revenged by Moxie Crocodile. Enamorous forces that out. Another Tailwind Mon. Earth Power brings Glamora down to Sash, but Life Orb brought in range of Power Gem. Iron Treads able to spin away hazards. Crook's back in. EQ doesn't KO. Great chip onto the Crook. Into Torn on the choice locked EQ. Treads sack to Volcanion. Annihilate bin, but only a U-turn. Good read. Alomomola brought super low. Baited into Protect to get in Azelf. Nasty plot up on just a flip turn. That's huge. Outspeeds Torn. T-Bolt brings it down. Alomomola 2. Psychic crits to finish Annihilate despite the Ghost Terra. Great cleanup from Azelf. Great play from Greg. Next up, stop me if you've heard this one before. Gouging Fire sets up and gets 6 KOs for the Incineroar, this time against the Kanto Kinglers. Rillaboom knockoff into Deoxys as rocks go up. Deoxys recovers up. Corviknight defogs them away, but teleport into Gouging Fire with a Photosynthesis speed boost. Tailwind is not enough for Corviknight. 2 Dragon Dances, Terra Grass to get neutral to Boulder's rock coverage, then Terra Blast for the KO. KO's Hoopa 2, Heat Crash for Rillaboom, Terra Blast for Rotom, Heat Crash for Corviknight, and Terra Blast for Ursaluna. Another clean sweep for the newest Incineroar. Why even bring the rest of the team? Next match, it's the Agrons starting their return to form with the Psyduck starting to flounder, both moving to 2-2 with the win for the Agrons. Sandy Shocks takes half of Hat's health as it kisses the incoming Moltres, getting burned, and then Brave Bird from the physical Moltres. Hat barely hangs on, gets off the nuzzle to paralyze Moltres, now trading with Hoodra but roosting up. Volcarona in on Archaludon, gets up a Quiver Dance and T-Wave, misses, oh no, Flamethrower barely doesn't KO, and then the surprise Stone Edge catching Volcarona for all 100%. The Volcarona sacking tradition does continue. The bridge not pulled in by Magneton swaps to the ancient form, then a slick double to Moltres lets it flame charge up to KO Hatterene. Seems nice, but full paralysis letting Magneton Oko back with T-Bolt. But now what's surviving Earth Power? Does over half to Hoodra, then Oko's Torkoal. Roaring Moon in, Pelipper is the answer to force the booster energy. Tanks the Terra Dark knockoff barely. D-Dance on the U-turn out. Darkspawn in, takes 60% from Iron Head. No flinch, gets off Yawn to force out Moon. Hoodra KOs Archaludon, but bundle into Ice Beam. Pelipper sack to the incoming Magneton, but back to the bundle in the rain. Hydro Oko's Moon, then sub up, and boom goes Magneton. The Agrons, good looking win. Next up, the Noctows beat the Steamrollers, but with only one side clicking moves. I'm not dignifying this with any more than just a simple W for the Noctows. Next match, it's the Corviknight Clobbers who continue to roll with a big win over the Clods. Turn 1, Primarina does over half to his Balthor, prompting in Clod who poisons Altaria. Screamtail doing huge damage to Altaria, thwarting the Fire Spin Perish Song's plans as it swaps out into Ogerpon on rocks. Gyarados in on Swords Dance. Trailblaze up as Ogerpon takes negligible damage. Trailblaze again and Ivy Cudgel to KO Screamtail. Greedy with another Swords Dance and Trailblaze. Espathor brings it low, but another Trailblaze KO. King Gambit does force it out with Sucker Punch at least, but Zapdos is in, getting out-traded by Kowtow, but at least that's a static into full paralysis, letting in Great Tusk to spin away rocks and bulk up on the Gyarados switch, which is low enough that CC KOs. Claude down to EQ, King Gambit down the same way after a Sucker Punch, and Chi-Yus down as well. The too much power behind the Clobbers. Next up, how about my Bouffalant grabbing another win, this one against the Boulder Boulders. Turn 1, Cinder and Meow exchange damage. Cinder wins the trade by proccing Sash, both sides swap out, or Choreo forces out Hands. Tailwind's up but falls to Mismagius, who then trades big damage with Quaquaval, but Hands back in, tanks 2 hits, KOing back with that Helmet recoil, only go down to Terra Fairy Thunderous, fast-paced game. Thundy out into Heatran, who takes half from Cinder, high jump kick. Choppleberry, the revenge KO complete, but Young Mega takes out Heatran return, then also Meowscarada after some chip. Thunderous and Empoleon eats up Terra Blast, barely survives a crit Volt Switch, and Flip turns out of Mew. Mismagius Shadow Ball, Mew hangs on. Weakness policy, but just a Draining Kiss. Latios gonna revenge KO that, then hurt Thunderous, survives on just 5%, finishes off the Genie for the Bouffalant's second win. Next match, would you look at that? Someone finally seemed interested in taking down Dragonite. The Chill and Chi-Yus finally follow their first WCL loss, this one to Michael's Route 1 Birbs in a 2-0 match. This was the closest of the week, which gave Michael a good enough excuse to feature his win as match of the week. Cottony plus some heroics from Castrodon and Crocalor. The lower tiers came here to play today. Check out Michael go over this match in the match of the week here on the WCL channel. And finally, the highly anticipated matchup of undefeated teams doesn't look like it disappointed either. Our only preseason ranked upset of the week as the Wooper Boopers look unstoppable with a 3-0 win over the previously undefeated Terrifier Heatwave. Sableye gets up screens on Landorus's rocks, also taunting Jirachi and taking a bunch from Ice Punch before turning out into Belly Bolt, a good static onto Jirachi. Terra Ghost, reflect up to, back into Lando on Serena for another U-turn back into Belly Bolt, baiting Triple Axel and the static there too, but Enamorus is out, Tailwind up. Clef forces it out. Jirachi gets up rocks on the Terra Ghost Belly Bolt. U-turn out into Sableye as Swish heals it up, enough to get another set of screens up and go back into Baxcalibur to D-dance up. Reflect Belly Bolt. There's screens everywhere, taking nothing from EQ. Out into Clefable. The walls are here to play. Jirachi in as Belly Bolt goes back to full, but now Jirachi can't survive another Ghost Terra Blast. Forced out into Serena on Baskia Legion. Phantom Force claims the KO. Sableye into set screens again. Deoxys gets up a spike and back into Belly Bolt to KO, but there's Enamorus. Terra Stellar. Terra Blast is super effective on Belly Bolt, so that's a KO. Then another one to boost up more. Deoxys removes Boots but goes down 2. Moonblast takes out Clefable 2. Revavroom finally puts an end to it with Spin Out, but that invites in Baxcalibur again. EQ KOs that. Clefrush KOs Basket Legion, and Ice Shard picks off Lando. It's just one threat after another for the Boopers, off to an impressive 4-0 start. And that's what happened in week 4. Again, it's the halfway point of the season, and our power rankings are looking relatively the same, but a little bit of a shakeup with some losses from some undefeated teams. We've got the Noctowl still up at the top, Boopers moving into second place, with the Terrifier Heatwave tumbling down a little bit. Corviknight Clobbers at 4, Cincinnati Incineroar up to 5, Chill and Chi-Yus down to 6, Calgary Corviknights at 7, and look who's back again. It's the Waterdeep Wobbuffets on the list there at 8. I want to start off, as always, at the top here, Michael, and we talked about this at the beginning a little bit before we hit record. The Noctowls and Boopers, I think, maybe in a little bit of a class of their own. Steve even left some notes for me saying maybe the Boopers have enough to challenge the Noctowls for number 1. What do you think? Is there enough there? Do you think there's a gap between 2 and 3? What are your thoughts on the Noctowls and Boopers seasons thus far?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of a gap between 2 and 3. The difference between the Noctowls and the Boopers right now, I think, is just a little bit of kind of differential in performance. We looked at the strength of their schedules so far, and we didn't find too much different between them. We thought they both had pretty similar schedules, but the Noctowls do have 7 differential over the Boopers, so we think they're performing very similarly, but the Noctowls are just slightly outpacing them, which I think definitely lets them keep the top spot there. But the Boopers are doing really well, and I'd love to see them really kind of push the tempo and start pushing against the Noctowls record there.
Yeah, of note, in their last 8 matches since making a transaction last season, the Boopers are 7-1, with their only loss coming in the playoffs there. They are on a hot streak right now. Speaking of heat, we do keep the Terrifier Heatwave above the Corviknight Clobbers, despite the Clobbers being undefeated, and it didn't seem like there was all that much pushback from me whenever this was proposed to keep a 3-1 team ahead of a 4-0 team. Remember, power rankings are not strictly just standings here. We talked a little bit before here about the strength of schedule as well. That seems to hold true for the Clobbers being pretty weak in that department.
Yeah, the Heat Wave, their only loss is to the Boopers up there, right above them, that they just had this week. So you can't fault them too much for that. They lost to a very good team, and the Clobbers, while they have a good record, their schedule so far just hasn't had any particularly definitive wins. So we're keeping the Heat Wave above them for now. But if they get a big win under their belt, they could definitely be moving up.
Yeah, undefeated is still impressive, but would like to make sure that that's not just an illusion. And speaking of, man, this next grouping of three was a little tough to grasp here, especially the next two there. The Incineroar and Chi-Yus really have gone off the back of just a couple mods, which we'll see a little bit later in the MVP race. And the Calgary Corviknights, our other 3-1 team, haven't really seen all that much from them. Michael, we're having a tough time figuring out exactly where the Incineroars and Chi-Yus need to be, but you did a great job exposing the Dragonite from the Chi-Yus. Wonder if Gouging Fire is going to be next up on the list for the Incineroar?
Yeah, I mean, these two teams, they've had particularly dominant games, big sweeps from the Gouging Fire and from the Dragonite. Definitely saw the Dragonite falter a little bit this week. I think the Incineroar have a little bit more to the rest of their team, or they've at least shown it thus far this season. So definitely agree with putting them above them. But it is the question of, like I saw that it is possible to shut down the Dragonite if you know what it's going to do. Are we going to see people starting to adapt to and shutting down that Gouging Fire? And are these teams going to be kind of identified as one-trick ponies that people can adapt to? Or are they going to start digging deeper into their bags of tricks and really kind of differentiating themselves and asserting themselves as real teams to watch out for?
Yeah, I do wonder what it's going to take to overcome those particular mons, but also what we're going to see from the rest of their teams does seem to be a huge factor. A shout out to the Calgary Corviknights 3-game win streak as well. Just still waiting for a pretty big win from them too. And then at the bottom, yeah, the Wobbuffets are back in here. If you recall, week one, it was a very close matchup against the number one rated Newport Noctilles that I think Steve had a pretty good chance to win, even, which, in our opinion, separates them a little bit from the rest of the 2-2 pack that we'll go over in a little bit, but still just behind Calgary there, Michael.
Yeah, no, it's that week one loss, that very close loss that we think pushes them kind of above the other 2-2s as the closest to have kind of being 3-1. So
Yeah, and I know Steve will be happy to see that, although probably not happy to be potentially be featured in the last segment of the power rankings and recap. Though we'll get to that in just a little bit. First, I did tease the 2-2 teams. Boy, we have a little bit of a packed crowd here in the standings. Yeah, still just 3 undefeated teams down from the 5 the previous week, and I think that may be whittling down in the near future as well. A few 3-1 teams, but those only go down to number 7, at which point we have a few 2-2 teams picking it up, starting at number 8. Remember, for the playoffs, every team that has at least the record of the number 8 team will make it into the playoffs in a play-in round to make sure that we get all the best teams involved. And that does include, hey, look at us. We're in here, number 9, Buffalo Bouffalant, Akron Agron sneaking in at 10, Route 1 Birbs at 11, and Summit County Psyduck still hanging on there, -4, but at number 12 at 2-2. The spread has been incredible this season, seeing a lot of very good teams falling down relatively early on. At least some of us were able to crawl back up to 2-2. Michael, we've talked a little bit previously on here about maybe having a big three almost, right? Me, Steve, and the Noctilles have had a lot of success recently, but it wasn't all that long ago that it was you and the Steamrollers in back-to-back finals as well. And a lot of very historically strong teams off to some middling starts. What are your thoughts on kind of the jumbling up of teams, having some teams that were originally thought to be kind of lower mid potentially being we see them undefeated 3-1, and what do you think of the standings so far in the season? What's your take on all this?
yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to see. And honestly, as much as like I hate to be taken down a peg, it is great to see these upsets, see coaches kind of rising above where we kind of had anticipated them to be. We've gotten tons of new coaches recently that have been doing great. So it is interesting to say. I definitely do think there's something to be said about some of these. Some of these losses have been either kind of influenced by luck and hacks, or I think my two losses, I definitely feel while we're pretty definitive, definitely came largely on the back of just two bad calls on my part. So I definitely think the coaches down here haven't been getting significantly outplayed, and I'm excited to see kind of how this all shakes out in the back half of the regular season. Are all the top teams going to keep performing? Are we going to see some of the people who had a little shaky start kind of right the boat a little bit, or how is everything going to go?
Yeah, I do love seeing all these teams in here that we didn't have at the top in preseason. It's probably a good sign that the other coaches aren't being significantly outplayed. Having a lot of group up there is pretty nice. And hey, as much as we would like to say that we're going to turn things around, looked at the numbers a little bit earlier. Bouffalant have an incredibly difficult second half schedule. Birbs not too easy either. It will be a little bit difficult if we make it into the playoffs. Watch out. But hey, this is your chance to keep us out as well. It's going to be pretty tight. I wonder if 4 wins is even going to be enough with 18 teams to keep track of. We have the MVP race to go over as well. Yeah, it's the same characters up there at the top. Dragonite Gouging Fire is up there with another 6 KO performance. Ogerpon Wellspring keeping up as well in the top 3. We're finally starting to get rid of maybe some outliers, some mods that are only there for 1 or 2 matches, some mods that won't be able to dominate week to week. Shout out to Komala, still love you, baby, 4-0. What stands out to you in this top currently 11 listing, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the Dragonite and Gouging Fire, as we touched on before, have been incredibly dominant in their showings thus far, except for kind of the Dragonite this week. But, are we going to see them continue to perform, or are people going to adapt to them? And even if, perhaps they adapt too much and still lose matches to the rest of the team, are we going to start seeing them getting shut out of some KOs? And also, just shout out to that Ogerpon Wellspring, something that you think of as more of a defensive of the Ogerpon forms, right up there with the kill leaders. Great to see him up there.
Great
Her up
decision.
there.
Great decision to just give a +1 to Terracost and all the Ogerpons, really. Shout out to a couple of coaches here too that are up at the top that have multiple members here on the KO leaderboard. I see the Boopers have Baxcalibur and Denamoris, and I see the Noctows have Greninja and Regieleki. Pretty much all according to plan for those couple of teams, having those mons lead the way. That's all of the recap we have for you, and that means we get to look towards the second half of the season. That's going to start, of course, with the Week 5 schedule. And again, this was supposed to be a more down week, according to the schedule maker, Steve. But, Michael, there is plenty to look forward to in this week. What catches your eye?
Yeah, I mean, so I think first I'm going to start off with the Noctowls and the Chi-Yus. We've talked about the Chi-Yus a lot this week, and it's a big test for them. The Noctowls are incredibly good, have been doing great, but if the Chi-Yus can have a good performance there, that goes a good, decent way to proving that, they're not just being carried on the back of Dragonite that people aren't prepared for. But at the same time, if they get shut out, it is another potential nail in the coffin of people are learning to adapt to them. And then I also want to shout out the Corviknights and the Corviknight Clobberers. Of course, the most exciting thematic matchup of the league, but also between two coaches that are doing very well. It's a 4-0 in the Clobberers, who we said need to get a nice big win out of under their belt. And the Corviknight are doing great as well. And, we'd love to see them kind of solidifying their record. It's going to be a good match, I think.
Absolutely. Shout out to that aesthetic matchup. Very beautiful. For me, obviously, I'm going to have to look at my own match here. The Bouffalant and Boopers. I shouted out the Boopers for being 7-1 in their last 8, and that playoff match they lost was a pretty close one, actually, to my Bouffalant. But those 7 wins also included a win against the Bouffalant as well. We're starting to become just destined rivals at this point. That would be a huge win for the Boopers. Wonder if that would be enough to really separate them from the rest of the pack at that point. Really would clinch them playoffs for sure. That could be a big one, even if my team is currently only 2-2. We have a couple of other potential interesting matches here. Aggron's Boulders catch my eye a little bit. Aggron's at 2-2, Boulders at 1-3. And yes, the Boulders haven't had a real win yet, with the week 1 being a forfeit. But man, they've looked good in their last couple of losses. Wonder if they can convert that into a win, as the Aggrons are starting to get back on track as well. And on the other hand, the Psyducks are starting to fall off pretty bad there at the bottom. And the Close Combat Club had a brutal schedule to start their season. Doesn't get that much easier for them either, so they need to pick up these wins where they can. That could be a big one, determining the bottom of the standings there. But of course, that would do it from us. We have one more thing that we have for you. Unfortunately, Michael is all too familiar with the curse wheel. It affected him week one. I wish we could say that we kept re-rolling it to make sure that Michael got on there. But after that week one win, it really got you there, I think. So, what are you hoping to see from the curse wheel this time?
Probably, I mean, you're not up there, I'm not up there. Maybe just revenge on the Wobbuffets for, getting me cursed. But we'll see. The Noctowls losing to the Chi-Yus, I think, would be, like I said, very significant, be a big shakeup in the rankings here. So it'd be cool to see that, but no, just revenge on the Wobbuffets, please.
Rolling for Steve. I hear you. I hear you. Let's see if we can get there. Oh, it's not going to be all that close to them, even. And in fact, it's barely crossing over, and that's barely going to be a 5, as I believe we're going to be trying again to hit the Incineroar, correct?
It's the Incineroar.
Man, they are just trying to dodge fate here terribly. So I wonder if this will catch up with them. Curse Wheel really did not do very well last week. Maybe doubling down on them will help people figure out the gouging fire. Maybe that's the issue here. That will wrap it up for us. Wonder if the Curse Wheel is going to continue its streak or not. Thank you to Michael for joining me here. Don't forget to check out everything that he does on the channel. In particular, he does a lot of the draft stuff with us, as well as Match of the Week. Don't forget to check out his match, his win this past week against the previously undefeated Chill and Chi-Yus right here on the channel. We should be back next week, back here with Steve, to talk about what happened in week 5. We'll see you then.